There is a great variety of electric cars currently available on both used and new markets, but something they pretty much all share in common is a high price. Now, MG is a company going up against that with low cost but efficient electric cars that are based around being as easy to use as possible. Now, the new MG5 is one of its latest vehicles, and it's one of the few electric estate cars currently available in the UK. So if you are wanting a low-cost EV that's practical and efficient, why should you be looking at this? Well, in our video today, we're going to find out. This newly designed MG5 looks particularly good, and the sleek front end is far more premium in terms of looks than we've come to expect from MG. Obviously, being an estate, it's designed around practicality, but we think the dimensions and the chrome accents make this whole car look really good. Though the MG5 has been designed to be as cost-effective as possible, you wouldn't sense that this is a budget model from in here. Of course, £30,000 is decidedly not budget, but compared to the rest of the electric market, it's severely undercutting it. Despite that, it's got loads of great fixtures and fittings. All cars get a 10.25-inch display, and that houses all of your media and navigation functions. And you also get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto included as standard, so you can just mirror your smartphone onto the screen too. I think it's a bit of a pain that the heating and ventilation is located into the screen. As I've spoken about before, I prefer to have physical buttons, but you do get a shortcut button on this setup down here, so you can quickly and easily find it. Another good feature is the fact that the transmission section flies over this bottom area, which is really good for loose items, and it's rubberized too, so it stops them from rolling around. And once you're there, you'll also find 2 USB charging ports and a 12-volt socket too, so there's loads of charging options as well. You've also got 2 big cup holders in the middle and a nice deep section in the center. So overall, I feel like it's both well equipped and very nicely made. The fit and finish is really good. I tell you what, it's hard not to be impressed by the space that you get in the back of the MG5. I've got loads of leg room, knee room, room for my feet, and plenty of headroom too, and the seat is in my usual driving position. It's also a really nice flat floor, so whoever's going to be sitting in the middle doesn't get shortchanged in terms of room for their feet. All right, it's a little bit basic. There's no independent controls for the heating and ventilation back here, but you do get a USB and a USB-C charging port, so at least you can keep your devices topped up. And this rear seat in general is reasonably flat, and it's not awfully bolstered, but I think it's going to prove quite comfortable over long journeys. I just think overall it's ticked the box for space, which is what you want from a car like this. And you also get ISOFIX points on both of the outside seats, so yes, very impressed back here. Obviously, if you're looking at an estate car, then practicality is going to be at the forefront of your priorities, and with its 464 litre boot loaded up to this section here, the MG5 definitely has that practicality box ticked. And when you compare it to a car that's similarly priced, like the Volkswagen ID3, that only has 385 litres to offer, so you can see how much more space you're getting despite not having to pay any more. I also like the fact that this car has a split level boot, so you can put the cables underneath and keep them stored away and nice and tidy. There's quite a bit of a lip there, so bringing things out is going to prove a bit of a chore, particularly if they're heavy, but overall, I like this space. So, is the fuss-free nature of the MG5 matched by an equally pared-back driving experience? Yeah, I would say it was. There's a 250-mile range, up to 250 miles, depending on which specification of MG5 you get. So it's got more than enough in the tank to do shorter journeys and those longer ones as and when you need to as well. It can do a 10 to 80% charge via a rapid charger in about an hour, so that's a little bit off the pace of some rivals. And a full charge via a home 7 kilowatt charger will be around 9 hours. So overnight, it's gonna be a full overnight charge to get that fully topped up battery. The driving experience definitely leans more towards the comfortable than the involving, and actually I think that's something that is very refreshing these days. There's a little bit of body lean, there's a little bit of roll, but all of those things add up to make this car just more comfortable, and I think that's not a bad thing at all. Down this slightly mismatched road that we're driving on now, it's dealing well with potholes, it's getting over the worst of the imperfections, and if you're driving fully loaded with kids in the back or dogs in the back, then you're going to want them to be comfortable. You don't want their teeth rattling around, so I think this car does really well on that front. There's quite a loud noise from the electric motor. When you step on it, it's certainly louder than I've come across in other electric cars. That does make it quite exciting, but you can tell that there's not as much sound insulation as you'd find in other rival EVs. You can hear the water splashing up inside the walls, and you can just hear the wind and the air rushing around. That's going to come as a byproduct of having a cheaper price tag. There's no way of getting around it. And I think it's quite a reasonable trade-off in order to still get a very practical, very useful car. The performance is good. I feel that judging EVs based on their figures alone is actually not that useful, because when you get in and drive them for the first time, or if you've just come out of a diesel or a petrol car, you'll be amazed at how quickly they accelerate away from the line. This car isn't as sharp to accelerate as something like a Cupra Born, and we've done a review on that. You can go and check that out now on the Motors.co.uk YouTube channel. But compared to a traditional petrol or diesel estate car, I think you'll find that the MG5 feels quite exciting and quite a lot brisker away from the line than you might expect. The steering is really light. It's not overburdened with feel. I think that lightness could make this car feel a touch nervy at times. It certainly doesn't feel planted. But again, this isn't a sports car. This isn't a performance vehicle. This is a usable everyday electric estate car, and so the steering more than matches up to it, I feel. How does it compare to something like a Skoda Kodiaq? I think it does quite well. I'd say that the low-speed ride in this car is slightly more comfortable than the Enyaq, particularly the Enyaq's on the large wheels and with the Sportline suspension pack. I think that this is a whole lot more comfortable. As you can see, I'm getting a little bit more of that roll and that just moving about, but it feels quite pleasant. It feels like an old school estate car, and that's quite nice. As in most EVs, there's regen braking to be found in this one, and unlike the EQA that we've been having a look at, you don't control it via the paddles, and you don't control it by a specific mode on the transmission. There's actually a switch down to my left hand side which is titled KERS, which is quite exciting for F1 fans, I'm sure. And that's how you adjust how much regen you're getting. So level 3 is the most amount of regen. You let off the throttle and it'll really start to slow itself down, and then you can taper that back to remove it entirely, and that's what you'll want to do on the motorway. You actually want to have the car to coast, because that's the most efficient way of driving an EV. Around lanes and around town, I tend to have it the most aggressive regen setting, so you can largely drive it without having to use the main brake pedal. The visibility is pretty good too. These front pillars are nicely slim, so there's not too much of a blind spot, and there are some gaps in between the wing mirror and the body itself, so you can see straight through. Over the shoulder isn't too bad, but it is blocked slightly by some pillars, and the rear screen is relatively slim, but that comes from having an estate car body style. It just tends to be a bit of a factor, unless you've got something like an old Volvo where there was the big square screen. But that's not the case on most modern estate cars. It's more than usable enough, but I think it's just a little bit tight. I find the MG5 to be a really appealing package. It's got that no-nonsense approach that I think the EV market has been crying out for. It's got a really decent sized boot, a very pleasant interior with a good amount of standard equipment, and it does all of that at a price that undercuts so many of its rivals. It's quite hard to imagine. The great news is that the MG5's fundamentals, including that great sense of space and practicality, were present on its predecessor, which is largely just the same. And that means that you can get the same level of space that you have in this car for a far more appealing price on the used market. So it's worth checking out on Motors.co.uk to see some of the examples that are available there at the moment too. Thank you for watching this new car review on the MG5. If you have enjoyed it, please leave us a like below and let us know in the comments section if you think the MG5 is worthy of that estate car name. Would you pick it over a conventional petrol or diesel estate car? And since you're here, please remember to subscribe to the Motors.co.uk YouTube channel and hit that bell icon so you're notified every time we upload a new review.